This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Today we are going to Financial College. We're going to talk to Dr. Buck Joffrey, who is a very bright former board certified surgeon, neurosurgeon, ENT surgeon. Then he went into plastics. I mean, he only practiced for 7 years, but then he got into investing and is now a manager of over $1 billion in assets in the Wealth Formula Investor Club. It's, I think, a very informative discussion. We talk a little bit about, I think, how it's relative in dentistry, and hopefully some folks will get some tips. I know I sure did. Talks about saving taxes and certain investments, and talks a lot about being more knowledgeable and not being afraid. It's like anything else. The more you learn about it, the more you learn, the more you know, but the more you know, the less afraid you should be of some of this area. And I know I'm 60 and it's already something I'm still learning. So anyway, really enjoyed. Hopefully it's very helpful and beneficial to you, your loved ones, and helps you in your journey. As always, Fee for Service Podcast brought to you by Kettenbach Dental, excited to announce the first major advancement in fluoride varnish. No longer using alcohol or resin. Instead, patients will want the new treatment delivered with a muco-adhesive dimethicone gel, which leaves the teeth feeling smooth and silky. No more grit. Contact Kettenbach today for more details and do more varnishes that patients will appreciate. Call 877-532-2123 or visit kettenbachusa.com. If you like the show, click like, subscribe, share it with your friends. If you don't like it, well, please tell me. I'd appreciate the feedback and how we can help improve our products. And really, it's here to help all the dentists and their loved ones. So hit me up, sunnyspira@gmail.com, or text or call 607-624-2962. I know I must be crazy, but I put that out there because I truly want to make sure we can do the best we can. All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the show.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. Today, we're going to go a little outside of dentistry, but we're going to talk about investing and wealth creation and a lot more that I think people have some interest in. And we're going to talk to someone who's really done a phenomenal job at it. I kind of found out about Dr. Buck Joffrey through oh my goodness, I lost his name, Tom Wheelwright. And I was like, oh my goodness, let me, and I started following his podcast and listening to some of the things he did. Let me give you a little background. He's a former board-certified surgeon that has turned real estate entrepreneur, best-selling author, and, of course, podcaster. His podcast, Wealth Formula, has over 2 million downloads and focuses on personal finance for high-paid professionals such as doctors, lawyers, and small business owners, and an expert in alternative finance and tax mitigating investments, which I personally have been able to take advantage of a couple of those. Buck oversees over $1 billion in assets as the founder of the Wealth Formula Investor Club. Welcome, Dr. Buck. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Sonny. Buck is fine. No one calls me doctor anymore. I haven't practiced in years, but
it still counts, man. It still counts. Very good. So how did you, first of all, how did you get into that? How did you get into medicine? What was your pathway there?
For medicine? Oh gosh. It's interesting because I didn't go to college thinking I would be a doctor. In fact, I'm sure that a lot of us had mothers who wanted us to be in the medical field, right? And mine was definitely like that. And I remember very explicitly telling my mother, don't even go there, Mom. I'm just going to be disappointed because I'm
Really?
not going to be a physician. Yeah. And
My
so,
son, the doctor. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And so, the first year, I was just taking a bunch of history courses and doing well. And the second year, I was like, maybe I'll try the science thing. And I did it, and I kind of got hooked. And the next thing you know, I was a molecular biology and biochemistry major, and it's the only classes I liked taking, which was a huge departure from where I was. And then, like a lot of people, I just kind of had a decision to make. What do you do with that? You're going to get a PhD, possibly. I thought about that, about
Uh-huh.
an MD, PhD, because I was very academic. And then just said, okay, well, I'll just go to medical school. And so I wish it were more of a dramatic story, but I think it's like a lot of people where they get on the conveyor belt of education and they end up high paid professionals, right? And that probably represents a good chunk of people out there.
But listen, I mean, you not only went through medical school, you went into surgery and became board certified. So that's not a 4 or 5 year deal. That's
No, no. In fact, I started out as a neurosurgeon, and I was at the University of Michigan, and so I was doing brain and spine and all that stuff, and decided that I needed more sleep than that, so I ended up doing a otolaryngology head and neck surgery, which you guys know is ENT, of course,
yes.
and so I was an ENT surgeon. And then after that, I did a cosmetics fellowship, so I ended up doing plastics after that, and so a hell of a long ride for a very short career, because I only practiced for about 7 years after training, and then became a full-time podcaster and investor, and the rest is history.
All right. So let's dive into that part. I just find it
Yeah,
fascinating. I mean, my first observation is you're addicted to learning, you know,
yeah,
and
for
that
sure.
curiosity has to bode well for your new what you're into now, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, I think um, I'm completely self-taught, and and from that regard, so I feel very comfortable being in any situation with financial people. My brother actually ran one of the major sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East, and he decided to come work with me. And I don't have any formal financial training at all, but listen, you guys were all, you go to dental school, you went through all that learning. You're all capable of learning this stuff. I think the Wall Street guys like to pretend that they have some sort of edge on you, that they know more than you. But the reality is, if you put your head down and you try to learn this stuff, it's really not that hard. And speaking the language is probably 99% of it, and the rest of it is like anything else. It's just it's being having good instincts and making good decisions. And you're going to miss sometimes too, and you just have to know that. So
Well, I'm going to use the analogy because what you just said is literally in dentistry. That's what orthodontics is, right? Like they don't teach
uh-huh.
it to you in school. They keep it from you and they make it out to be this incredibly complicated process that you couldn't possibly, with your primitive brain, understand how this works. And
Right.
then you take some courses and you're like, oh my goodness, this is kind of basic physics,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
kind of. Right, right,
So it's like,
right.
I think we could do this, but
Yeah, for
like
sure.
to your point. So I would like my first question, right on point with what you just said. What are some of the key vocabulary or skills and terms that really need to be understood?
Well, I think that, the thing is that what MBAs learn in business school is very different from what we need to know as personal finance, right? We think MBAs know
100%.
a lot about money. Well, they know about being managers is what they know about. And then you have all of these courses that the wealth managers take, and they essentially, over a course of just several months, learn all the vocabulary they need to. So, but the reality is, when it comes down to personal finance, I think a lot of it is pretty. It ends up being pretty. You learn some of the learn some of the language, but the concepts end up being pretty straightforward, in my opinion. So, for example, when I think about personal finance, the first and foremost, like I'm thinking about the investments themselves, but I'm also thinking about asset protection. I'm also thinking about estate planning. And those things end up becoming sort of the things that you have to start with. And they can become increasingly sophisticated as you go down the line. So tax mitigation is huge, as you know. I think one of the things that most people who are working for money, whether that's a W-2 or having a practice or whatnot, they like to think about how much revenue they're bringing in, and they often don't think about how much they could potentially be saving in taxes. Well, that's like a business that only cares about its top line revenue, doesn't care about its expenses, right? Just trying to make more and not trying to cut expenses. The reality is that there is lots of ways to legally reduce your taxes, and you just have to know the game, right? A lot of the CPAs out there that end up being in, the ones that the doctors use, the ones that we as the dentists and physicians, we end up using are the ones that are referred to us because they're quote unquote safe. That's not what we want, right? We want safe, yeah, but we want CPAs who actually know the law, because the reality is, in terms of the tax code, very little of it is actually black and white. The vast majority of it is what you interpret and when you make of it. And that requires a CPA who's actually going to, work a little bit harder. Everybody's so terrified of audits. Well, an audit, I remember the first time I got audited and my tax attorney, and I was terrified, right? I'm going to get audited. And my tax attorney's like, don't worry about it. It's just a negotiation. And then as it turned out, I ended up paying a few $1,000s because it was a negotiation. But if I hadn't, done all of the things that I did legally, I would have probably paid 20, 30% more in taxes, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we have to stop being afraid, because everybody tells us we're supposed to be afraid of tax mitigation strategies and stuff. There's plenty out there that is not at all on the fringe that we can take advantage of. So there's taxes. You take asset protection as another one. You can look at it as a very straightforward thing with LLCs and stuff like that. But I know some dentists, certainly in my community, who've sold practices and are sitting on 9 figures, and that's when you need to get really sophisticated. And you need to get sophisticated before that. But if you're already you're in the 7-8 figure range, you should probably be thinking about various trusts and that kind of thing for protection, and also for estate planning. And estate planning, we think about how many people. I'm always amazed at how many professionals don't have adequate life insurance, right? I'm just hugely amazed by that. Now, if you're going to get life insurance, maybe you should potentially look at something that actually works as an investment as well. So there's products out there, for example, various types of overfunded life insurance policies that you can use as very powerful investment tools. But those are not things that most of the time you're going to have any exposure to when you first talk to your financial advisor who's been managing the money of 3 generations of dentists, right? So yeah. So I think it's really, I think of personal finance as very much underappreciated by most high-paid professionals. I see it as a responsibility. Your personal finance, you should be looking at it as another business where you are trying to maximize your returns, decreasing your expenses, and protecting it, and ultimately making sure that when you pass away, you have a legacy, and that you're not paying all that to the government. So that's my generalized perspective of it.
So let's dive into that last part that you just started talking about, right? So you're a dentist, you're doing fairly well. You've got your basic things covered, and now you're starting to think, okay, you're starting to look at, like you talked about, it's not just what you invest, it's what you end up with as the investment, right? So there are investments that are tax smart or tax savvy or tax wise. Let's talk a little bit about some of those, because you talked about asset protection, right? And you started to get into a little bit of the life insurance, which I think there's a lot of people, at least I was personally brought up to think, you buy life insurance for life insurance, and then you put your money in investment. Don't pay extra on life, et cetera. You've heard that song and dance.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about. Let's start with the dentist who's thinking, okay, how do I get a better net value on my investment, net to me?
Yeah. So the first thing to think about, it's not a simple thing, by the way, but it's very doable, particularly for dentists who have practice. Most dentists seem to still, the dentists I know seem to have their own practice, aren't working for somebody necessarily.
Still the majority. It's still it's about 85%, depending on which stat you hear.
Yeah.
In terms of, well, independent. It may not be owners, but independently working, not within corporate structures.
Yeah. And I always find that dentists actually are quite a bit better at business than the MDs, by the way. Much better. But I will say this. So here's the thing. You brought up Tom Wheelwright. Tom's a friend of mine. And he has a saying, if you want to change your tax, you have to change your facts. Right? That's the bottom line. So you go back, my original mentor on this, Robert Kiyosaki, and if you have a book that he wrote called Cash Flow Quadrant, which I think that every dentist should read. Okay, Robert,
can you see me?
Oh yeah, I can see it.
There's the book, right, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
There's Rich Dad Poor Dad. But now Robert will tell you, when I talk to him about this, Rich Dad Poor Dad is written for the masses. Cash Flow Quadrant is written for you and me. Okay, Cash Flow Quadrant is the book that will help you understand this. But basically, what Robert says, and which is very true, is there are these quadrants in which you pay taxes differently. Right. First, there's he cuts it into a left side and a right side. And on the top left, you've got the W-2 wage earner who pays a very, who's going to pay taxes based on what they take out of, his check. And then below that, you have probably where the majority of dentists are, which is self-employed dentists. Right. And hopefully, most of them are at least in some kind of an LLC with an S corp, being taxed as an S corp. But often the case is that those people are paying more taxes than even the W-2 because they have self-employment taxes.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And then if you go to the positive side of the right side, which is the, paying less taxes quadrant, in the top right, you have the business quadrant, which is basically if your business is functioning, if you're a business owner and not owning a job, right? And then the other side and the lower right quadrant is the investor quadrant. So you want to, as much as possible, shift your money, your income streams from the left side of the quadrant to the right side of the quadrant. And that's easier said than done. However, you need to take incremental steps in how you do it. So for example, if you're paying significant self-employment taxes because you're taking money in that way, I mean, gosh, get on the right side of the quadrant, you become a business, you're an LLC, taxed as an S corp, take a little bit of a salary, and then a little bit of a W-2 salary, and then you've basically eliminated the issue of self-employment taxes, right? Now, then you can get a lot more sophisticated. This is where I'm not a CPA and I'm not, here for tax advice, but that's where you can get really creative, right? Now, you may have, let me give you an example of different things out there. So, for example, you might be a business owner, but you don't think of yourself as a business owner because you're not recognizing that you're a business owner. So, for example, I have some physicians who own surgery centers, or maybe they're part owners of surgery centers, right? Now, those guys, a lot of them don't recognize that income that they're getting is actually part of the business quadrant, right? And it should be taken as passive income because They're not operating the business themselves. And therefore, they can take this as passive income. Similarly, investment income from real estate or whatever it is that you're doing that's not stocks, funds, or other kinds of portfolio income is going to be passive income, right? Now, why do I make a big deal about passive income? Because there's really two major types of income. There is earned income and there is passive income. Passive income is much better than earned income. And basically, by definition, passive income is stuff that you earn by putting about, less. There's specific IRS rules, but
Right.
you're putting less than 500 hours.
Yeah,
You're putting less
there's a
than 500.
number. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So if you're that, you are, you've got passive income. Now, why is that important? Because a lot of the investments you make, whether that be in your business or your personal investments, you have the ability to depreciate some of those assets that you own. So, for example, and here's an example that probably there'll be some people that use this one if they're not already. There's a tax code, Section 179.
Yeah,
you're aware of that, I'm sure, Sonny. You're a sophisticated guy.
I don't know about that, but I have used it.
Yeah. So Section 179, and I don't even know what the limits are right now. Do you? Do you know what the
They
limits
keep
are?
changing. Last I knew it was like 500,000 or 600,000.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
a lot of
They
times
dropped.
it seems to sit around $500,000. But basically, if you have a business and you buy equipment for your business, Section 179 is going to allow you to write off that full amount, 100% of that in the first
1 year.
Now, here's the catcher, though. You're only going to be able to write that off against other like income, right? So, for example, it was other kinds of passive income. Now, what happens if you got $500,000 piece of equipment, but you bought it, you financed it, you only put $100,000 down, or even less, because medical equipment a lot of times you don't. What are you taking the depreciation on? You're taking it on the $500,000, not the deposit you put on. And the rest of it you can write off against other passive income, right? So there's lots of little things that you can do. Now you can say, well, gosh, I don't necessarily have any, business items to buy this year. Well, how about a car? How about a 6,000-pound car, which qualifies for Section 179, and you drive it mostly to work and for work purposes 50% of the time? Well, there you go. I have a G-Wagon that I bought off of Section 179. And I took, whatever $100,000 in that first year. I didn't pay the whole thing the first year. All I did was put the deposit down, and I mean, low interest rate after that. So you get the point. The idea is like, there's so many ways to do this. And by the way, this is not illegal. There's nothing illegal about this stuff. This is just being smart, I know a lot of people got really upset, not in any sort of political statement here, when Donald Trump, when he defended his not paying taxes by saying, well, it's because I'm smart. Well, I mean, he's using the tax code to not pay taxes, is what he's meaning. And that is smart, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that's kind of where the tax part of this comes in. Now, everybody's situation is totally different, and somebody like Tom is really good at sort of identifying structures. So a lot of times, if you go into a CPA like Tom or somebody who's really sophisticated, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the way you're operating and say, what we could do is create this entity, and well, this equipment that you have in your office actually could be leased by you by this other company that owns the equipment, and then you get this kind of write-off, and so on and so forth. The point is, I'm not bringing a specific issue here, but I'm just pointing out, like, there's ways to do it, but you have to be involved. You have to actively push for that, because no one's going to do that by, in the default mode that we've been raised to do things.
Well, you did mention it though too. Don't you feel though, in the scenario where you got a young learning professional, make sure that he has a truthfully good tax advisor, like his accountant understands the laws and how they're to be interpreted to your benefit, etc. I mean, Isn't it a good move?
It's really imperative. The challenge again in our field, professional healthcare professional, what I found when I was finished was, you ask around because you don't know any better, right? I didn't know any better coming out of training. So who should I use for taxes? And they, oh, this guy's really good. He's really conservative. Like that's a good thing, right? Yeah, use this guy for insurance. They send me to Northwestern Mutual. Oh, there's a really great guy at Northwestern Mutual. And well, it turns out Northwestern Mutual probably is like the worst when it comes to overfunded life insurance kind of policies, right? But we're just basing it off of it's a blind leading the blind. That's what it is at the end of the day.
But you go along because it's another professional. Well, he knows more than me. Got a little gray, a little snow on the rooftop. You know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So what's interesting, and I want to ask you a little bit more on this. So let's use a scenario. So let's take there's a dentist. He's renting. He's doing very well for himself. He or she, and I don't mean it to be gender specific, but let's say that the professional says, you know what, I want to get a piece of real estate. I want to own the real estate. I want to put my office in, right? And you already kind of alluded to a few things. Purchasing the real estate, like in the scenario with the physician that owns a surgery center, it'd be nice, most likely, right, if that's in a certain business entity like an LLC or something, and then they continue to rent from themselves, but they're two different businesses. Talk a little bit about some scenarios that you would advise if someone said, hey, Buck, how would you handle something like this? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, in those scenarios, what you really want to do is, again, try to keep all those entities separate, right? I think some of the mistake of buying your own building and thinking that, it's a good investment. Well, it's not if it's still going to be a good investment, but it's not going to be as good if you don't separate those businesses out. So, I've been in the scenario when I was practicing. I had a medical building that was in an LLC. It was in an LLC. It was rented out by me, my LLC, my medical LLC, and then I had a dentist on the other side who was renting too. Now, what's the advantage of that? Well, there's multiple advantages. But I think, again, now what you're doing is separating passive income from active income, right? And you're basically looking at that rental property as a source of not only passive income, but a source of depreciation, right? And so there's that's the right way to do it. Again, I'm not giving you tax advice, but also from an asset protection standpoint as well. So if you got sued as a dentist, it doesn't, you don't put your real estate at risk in the same bucket, right? So it's just trying to keep things separate. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Going out of network can be really scary, but staying in network can be even scarier and riskier too, long term. Insurance reimbursements aren't even keeping pace with inflation, which can really affect the quality of your work, not to mention the quality of your life. I'm Allison Bernstein.
I'm Dr. Josh Bernstein. We went out of network over 20 years ago, and we can show you what worked, what didn't, and how you can do it with minimal risk.
ThriveOutOfNetwork.com teaches you everything you need to know, including the most important part, which is getting your team on board. It teaches them how to communicate with patients and getting them comfortable with the entire process.
Go to ThriveOutOfNetwork.com and check it out today. That's ThriveOutOfNetwork.com.
Our show is sponsored by our good friends at Metadenta. Metadenta has served the dental community since the 1940s with award-winning innovation and a large catalog of dental products in most facets of dentistry. I personally use several of their products and recommend them to anyone I can. They are a sponsor of the program and are offering 30% off. That's right, 30% off anything site-wide at metadenta.com. Simply use the code FFSD30 at checkout and get your 30% instant savings.
from CR rated prophy angles, hygiene, high-speed handpieces, burr, endo, whitening. They more than have you covered. Their customer service is amazing, and they are willing to walk you through an order at any time. So if you have any questions, give them a call at 800-221-0750. That number, 800-221-0750. Or send them an email at orders@metadenta.com and mention the Fee-for-Service Dentistry Group and get your discounts.
Yeah, so in that scenario, right? The one rents from the other. Now, you talked about, what does the depreciation look like on that building
Mm-hmm.
for that professional, right? It's a 30-year. Is it amortized? Talk a little bit about that, because I know
Yeah.
that we talked a little bit about accelerated depreciation. We haven't talked about it, but I know Tom,
Right.
that's one of the big things, is accelerated depreciation, which you kind of have to be a real estate professional, right, to get the advantage of that, or no?
Yes and no. I'm going to give you I'll give you examples of how you don't necessarily have to be a real estate professional, and we can talk about being a real estate professional too, because there might be some spouses of some of your dentists who might want to be a real estate professional, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you take advantage of that? Well, first of all, it eludes me the number of years of normal depreciation on a medical building is. It's in the 30s. It might be 36 years or something like
Right.
that. Not sure. With apartment buildings, which typically was what we work, it's 27 and a half years. But okay, so
first of all, how screwed up is that, right? Like, really? Like, who is writing this code that I do think you're right. I think it's 36. They're just these odd numbers. Why can't it be 30 years here, 20 years there? Doesn't that just make a little bit of sense for somebody?
Well, who knows? I mean,
we don't have to make sense.
It doesn't have to make sense. We just have to know how to navigate around it, right? That's the big thing. So, but regardless, okay. So what you can do, there's something. So if you own a building, now you own an LLC, it is housing your business, right? You're renting from it. You're renting from your own LLC, and say maybe you have another tenant, who knows, whatever. But the advantages that you have there, from the tax standpoint, would be this: is that that's a piece of real estate you own, and therefore it's a business property. And so what you can do is you can do what's called a cost segregation analysis. Okay, and what that is it's an engineering study, and an engineering study that separates what's called personal property or chattel from real property. And generally what the personal property is stuff that you can just like pull out and throw out on if you really wanted to, you could throw it out on the lawn. Whereas the real property is the structure itself. Well, to give you a perspective on this, and again, the things that I'm most familiar is apartment buildings. But as it turns out, usually the engineering studies come out and they're variable, but usually it seems like about 30% of at least a commercial real estate or a apartment building would be personal property.
So in other words, you're buying $1 million property, $300,000 is viewed as personal property.
Right. Now, the advantage of personal property is that it depreciates quicker than real property. So in your case here, we're talking about real property that's depreciating at 36 years or whatever it is for a dental building. But that personal property, that 5 years is going to depreciate in 5 years. So 30% of that asset in this example would be depreciated at 5 years. And so that in itself is a nice deal, right? So now you're looking at, say it's $1 million building and you've got $300,000, you made a $300,000 down payment. Well, then you've got $60,000 per year that you're using to depreciate and basically offset any other potential passive income that you have, right? Now you can augment that. Now, a lot of people have missed the real golden era of this, but through something called bonus depreciation. And bonus depreciation in the last, in the Trump administration, they had a law that basically said okay, you know that 5 years that you're going to depreciate this, you can actually take it all in the first year, right? And so that was phenomenal, because then in apartment buildings, what we were doing is, okay, well, you know, we'd put 30% down, and, you know, investors would get K1 showing that they lost, you know, on paper, they lost as much money as they actually invested. So it worked out great. Like, the more money you invested, I mean, literally that was the amount of money you were getting as to offset other income. So it was great.
Right.
Bonus depreciation has been going down every year, and this year it is at, last year it went from 100% to 80%. This year it went down to 60%. It'll go down to 40% next year. And then, you know, and then you've got the whole, and then you're just going to basically go back to the way it used to be, with this just 5-year depreciation. But whatever the case may be, it's still a huge advantage. Now, you can take other assets, Sonny, and you could potentially skip the whole, you know, real property thing altogether. So, for example, you know, we have an aviation fund, and you're an investor in the aviation fund, and we're literally buying like 747s and all that kind of thing, and leasing them out to American Airlines. Great tenant, by the way, right? And so in that situation, an airplane, there's no real property. The whole thing is personal property, right? So in that situation, if you're buying into that, and the planes are leveraged, even if it's 50%, or say it's 30% or whatever, the whole thing is personal property. So if you have say, like this year, 40%, and you leverage that 40% depreciation, and you leverage that by 50%, well, guess what? 80% of your investment is going to be depreciable in the first year against other passive income, right? So the whole name of the game is to create or to divert as much income legally into passive income as you can, and then find sources of depreciation. It's like a hamster wheel, but it's a golden hamster wheel, so it's okay.
All right. So you're touching on a few things. Let's go into the life insurance scenario, which you talked about.
Yeah.
You mentioned Northwest Mutual with a overfunded, right? What did you call it? An overfunded life insurance
overfunded policy. So Northwestern Mutual does not do this well. You have to go through various other, like, I mean, it works much better with like a Penn Mutual or Mass Mutual. There's some other companies that we typically use. But it's essentially what the policies there allow you to do is to have life insurance, but have it actually make money for you. Now, when I finished training, I had some young guys around me who said, you know, whole life insurance is stupid,
right?
Or
it's
like
a scam.
Or permanent life insurance is a scam. And they said, what you got to do is just buy term, invest the difference. That's what you got to do. And then I had an older guy who actually told me that the best investment he ever made was overfunded whole life insurance. I don't know if he overfunded it or not, but whatever the case may be, this was back in 2008, 2009. This guy was working, and he was pretty old, and I was like, I'm not listening to that guy. So I decided not to listen to him until I started. I started making some money, and I was in some masterminds, and part of the masterminds were like these business ones where there's some guys who were making a lot of money. And I realized that when we'd have discussions about personal finance, these guys were all doing they were all doing permanent life insurance. And I'm thinking to myself, well,
so these are all high net worth people, right? These are not people who are, you know, hey, listen, buy NVIDIA, buy Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. These are people who are.
These are guys who are sitting on 8, 9, or probably 9-figure net worths at this point.
Sure.
And everyone was dealing with permanent life insurance. And so what I couldn't figure out was, so what's the gap here? What am I missing? And as it turns out, it's just stuff that's structured very differently. You know, most of us, as high-paid professionals, when we come out and we're offered whole life insurance, or permanent life insurance, I should say, It is worthless. It is not a good deal. It's not a good deal at all. But it's all the devil's in the details, right? And overfunding policies and minimizing commissions, broker commissions, and all that kind of thing plays a huge role in how you can make money. So
Say that one more time. Say that one more time, because that was key.
So, yeah,
Overfunding.
It's overfunding in ways that you minimize the commissions as well.
Minimize commissions.
And then it's ultimately how you use that money at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in something called, there's the concept of infinite banking has been around for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and we call it wealth formula banking because the difference is in infinite banking, what they talk about is using these overfunded whole life policies to borrow from, and then basically, just using it as your own bank, right? And just to, you're buying a car or whatever. The whole concept is based, though, on this idea that's a kind of a coup when you figure it out. Because when I first heard this idea of be your own bank, I was like, what does it even mean? I don't know why you keep talking about being your own bank. But what it is so when we talk about wealth formula banking, the concept is this. Okay, you invest, say, $100,000 into a life insurance policy, a permanent life insurance, a whole, and you are actually overfunding that. So meaning that you're putting more money in there than the premium actually is, and you can do that up to a certain level. Now, that money in a whole life insurance grows at sort of a fixed rate. Okay. And they're not going to be super impressive. They're going to change based on what the interest rates are and so on and so forth. Now, if you just dealt with things that way, then that wouldn't necessarily be a great investment. But here's the kicker. What you can do is you can actually borrow your money back from the insurance company. And when you do that, you're not actually borrowing your own money. You're borrowing money from the insurance company. And that's important because your money is still growing at a compounding interest rate. Meanwhile, you're borrowing at a simple interest rate. That means even if it's the same number, say it's like 5%, but you're borrowing at a simple interest rate versus your money growing at a compound rate, you're going to come out ahead. And so effectively what that means is, all right, well, if I take this money, I borrow it, and I invest it in something that's a cash flowing asset, then I'm literally using the same money to make money in two places at the same time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's the concept of wealth formula banking. Of course.
So let's get one more part of that example, because
yeah.
So when you say overfunding, so in other words, they come and they say, listen, I'm going to buy $2 million worth of life insurance for myself. And then we're going to do this permanent life insurance policy. In order to fund that, you're going to have to give me 20 grand. And I say, listen, I'm going to give you 60. Right. Yeah. So you're putting in an extra 40 in there.
Right.
Right. That's what we're really talking about when you're overfunding it. You're electing to put it in, and you're limited by certain amounts, right? Or is it a set amount, or is it amount over and above?
There is a limit amount because, the IRS actually doesn't want you to overfund it too much because it ends up getting better and better for you as an investor. Right.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's growing tax.
Right. It's growing. Right. Exactly. So
you take that, and then the standard formula, right, is okay. So of the $20,000, technically, we're going to use 10 to buy the life insurance, and we're going to keep this 10 in an investment, and we're going to let it grow. And then each year we're going to take out of this to pay for the life insurance, et cetera. Right. So you can see that. And like you said, it's at a kind of a lower number.
Right.
So walk me through that next part. So if I say, listen, you're showing me on my statements, right, that I have the extra 40 plus the 10, we'll just use simple numbers because I'm a simple guy. So you say, listen, I'm going to take 30 out. I'm going to use it to buy this apartment building in my town, or this 2-family. It's going to be 300,000. I'm going to put 10% down, whatever. Right. And that's going to create some cash flow. So there's that scenario. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah. So it's basically creating an additional layer of leverage.
But meanwhile, in my account, it still shows that there's that $30,000 that's still growing.
That's right. That's right. Now you're going to pay interest on the money that you borrowed
Right.
from the insurance company, but it's on their ledger, not on your money.
When you said, let's talk about the difference between simple and compound interest. Let's just use that example. As you said, you borrow it at simple interest from the insurance company.
That's right.
What does that look like?
Well, basically what that means is, you're just using, so the difference between the graphs, right? The usual simple and compound interest graph, right? The compounding interest is going to grow at an exponential rate, whereas there's a straight line of interest that goes up with simple interest, and that's what you're going to pay. You're not going to pay the exponential side. You're going to make the exponential side, and you're going to pay back at a simple rate.
So that would
which
look
is the
like
linear.
So that's like not like necessarily a mortgage, right? That is literally I'm paying
Right.
3% on whatever I owe. So if I pay you back 2,000 and 15 goes to my principal, or so then my next payment is 3% on what's left.
Well, that's right. I mean, so it's different from using a home equity line of credit, right? Because then it's
Right.
literally, you just took money out and you're literally borrowing the amount of money. That money's not there anymore because
Correct.
you took that equity out. So it's different from that regard, because what you're doing here is you're actually getting a return on your initial principal. And that's
It's a
why
big difference.
it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. Yeah, if you go to so if basically there's lots of examples of this. We've had some some simple cash flow type situations, but I mean it can really especially for people who are, say you're in real estate and you're buying real estate and the return profile goes way up, right? Now, by the way, you can also conceptually, if you're not really into these sort of cash flowing assets, there's other ways to do this. You can use overfunding, and maybe you're more comfortable with equities. Well, you can use what's called you can use an IUL, which is essentially an indexed product that allows you to take the upside of the stock market and not participate in the downside. Right. Actually, I remember hearing Tony Robbins talk about this in his book. And I was like, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Okay, so here's how this works. So in this scenario, you and we call this wealth accelerator. Again, it's it's part of our wealth formula banking.com business. But in this situation, what you do is, say you want to take you want to do a policy, and you put $100,000 in. You may have the bank contribute, $300,000. There's leverage right there because it's life insurance, and they look at the death benefit as collateralizing the thing, right? So what you're doing there is you are putting money into an account in the same overfunded way. Now, the leverage you're getting is because the banks are actually putting in money too, not just you. Now, you have, instead of trying to invest this into cash flowing assets, what you can do is you put it in a deal where you can take up to, say, I think right now it's 12% of the upside of the market. And your floor is a 1% gain in the market. You're not allowed to lose. Okay, so it's basically an options play that the insurance companies do. Now, okay, so say for example, you got a 7% gain in the market that year. You might be like, well, that's okay, but here's the thing: because you're leveraging, that 7% could end up being closer to a 30% return on the market because you've used the upside. Now, if the market loses that year, you're going to pay a little bit of interest, but you're not going to lose any more than that in the principal, regardless if the market goes 20% below or not. So it's sort of like investing in stock market with guardrails. And this is something that actually, if you look at premium finance, permanent life insurance, this is what they're talking about, right? This is in the high net worth world, this is called a LERP. You may hear that from, if you've got like,
Say that again. What's it called?
a LERP, life insurance retirement plan. So if you look
Okay.
it up, so this is effectively like kind of a super high net worth maneuver. And it also can be a way of significantly decreasing the amount of estate tax these people end up paying as well. By the way, that's a major. Go ahead.
No, the major what?
No, so it's a major reason why the ultra high net worth use these life insurance policies, because it essentially gets it out of their estate. And so, they're transferring hundreds of millions of dollars to their children or their family or whatever without estate taxes.
So would this be something, let's say someone who's set up like their retirement account, would this be a vehicle they would want in that retirement account, or would this be, it sounds like it's something that would be more beneficial outside of the retirement account?
No, I think it's more beneficial outside the retirement. It is a type of retirement account.
But you can use it in that, right? Like you can take retirement money, and if you have a
sure.
self-directed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't use. I don't know the rules on this exactly, but I don't think you can buy life insurance with IRA money. I don't think you can do that.
Okay.
So it has to be separate. It would be more like a super Roth.
Like in your Roth account. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It would be a Roth account effectively. It would be a different kind of Roth account because, again, remember those gains on the insurance side, they're not getting taxed.
Right.
And when you borrow them and you're spending it, it doesn't get taxed. And the idea is eventually for people using it for retirement income that you're going to die and your death benefit's going to pay off your loan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of it goes to your family.
Okay. Now, we're going to have to kind of wrap up fairly soon, but I can talk for all day on this. But so your advice, so a young doc starting out, starting to do well, starting to feel that they're at that point where now they have to just think about accumulating or building some wealth. Mm-hmm. Give some tips or some advice or some guidance to, because that's a lot of the people I think listening to the show.
Yeah. Okay. So here's one of the things. I'm just going to give you one hack. It'll help somebody in your audience, I'm sure. Which I think that if I was just coming out now and I was like, gosh, what could I do to make more money? The simplest way to make more money is by saving taxes. Okay. And I would love by paying less taxes.
Oh, not buy, B-U-Y, but buy.
No. I mean, we have, as you know, we have this great big investment group, but the reality is that if you want the most effective way to immediately put money back in your pocket, it's to pay less tax. So how can you do that? Let me give you one hack.
Pay less taxes, right?
Yeah. One hack is this. So we didn't get into the real estate professional designation, which is huge, but if you buy one of these short-term rentals, you effectively have all the tax benefits of somebody who is like me, who is a registered, like by IRS rules, I'm a real estate professional. And every tiny bit of every kind of income that comes in, I can offset with my depreciation from real estate, because that's what a real estate professional can do. You can't be a real estate professional if if you have a full-time job. The IRS won't allow that. However, if you have a short-term rental, the law is completely different. So with short-term rentals, you can do what I was talking about before, cost segregation. You can do bonus depreciation. You can take this money and guess what? You can offset it against your W-2 income, your earned income. That is the only example of that you can actually do that. Now you can do that in oil and gas but is full of charlatans. This is the problem with oil and gas, right? But if you want something, say you have a vacation house that you like, and you might even want to use it a little bit, maybe a week, a year, something like that. and you like it, or maybe you want to retire there somewhere, or whatever. But in the short term, you could use this and act like like a guy like me who does real estate for a living. You do a cost segregation analysis, you do bonus depreciation, and then apply it against your own W-2 income. That is the most powerful little thing that probably anybody could do out there right now if you're making money. And you get vacation rental out of it.
So short-term rental means you're not renting more than 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I think the law you'd have to look it up, because I actually haven't done short-term rentals myself, but I think it's not 2 weeks. I think it's a little bit more than that. But whatever the case may be, it's you're effectively, they're vacation rentals, right? Like VRBOs and stuff like that. They're different. You can't have somebody who's like living there in a 1-year lease. That's not a short-term rental anymore. That's a real rental, right?
Yeah, like a condo hotel, like
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
those
yeah.
designations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
vacation hotel, and you go on VRBO or whatever, put those things on there, and all of a sudden you've got an asset that's a cash flowing asset, and then probably even more than the income you make, the incomes could be pretty good too. But that depreciation element is gonna, like, you made 400 grand or something like that, and you were able to take 40,000 and depreciate that off your income. Well, guess what? Now your taxable income is 360 grand, not 400 grand. So,
And it's not your passive income, it's your income period. Like you said, your W-2
that's right. That's the only situation in which you can use depreciation against active income. That and oil and gas. Oil and gas, you can do that. But again, full of charlatans. Be very, very weary of oil and gas. The thing I like about the vacation rentals is, shoot, you can go there and you can go you have to look at the laws on this, right? But I mean,
we have a couple of those.
You just have to, yeah. So I don't know. Are you using that? Did you use that rule?
I'm gonna have to double check, but I know we have a couple in Clearwater Beach. It's a condo hotel.
I mean, you can absolutely, even if you've not done a cost seg and bonus on that right now, you can do that. It doesn't matter that you didn't do it yet. In fact, you could probably take the depreciation from the past years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably get 100%.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
I hope we did.
Oh, well, you better. And if you did it, you need a new account.
Trust me, I'm making some notes.
Let me know how that goes, Sonny. I'm curious, because I'm telling you that we all assume that the CPAs know what they're doing. And between you and me, even when I worked with Tom, I was driving the car there. So you really, the more you know, the arsenal that you can bring to the table, the better you're going to do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I really appreciate your time, expertise. If people want to find you and hear you, right? It's Wealth Formula, and your podcast is called the Wealth Formula Podcast, right?
Yeah, it's Wealth Formula Podcast. Yeah, I mean, you can get it anywhere. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right, Sonny. All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee for service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee for Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.